His name was Coordinator Bryn, and it managed the Council's security operations. Our defense protocols are in place. We're evacuating civilians from contested areas and establishing safe zones in the northern continent. The Krell will lose interest once the easy targets are gone. They always do. Jake stared at the coordinator. You're just going to let them kill until they get bored. What else can we do? Velcrin asked, and there was genuine confusion in his voice. They are apex predators, Commander. In nature, prey species do not challenge predators. We survive by avoiding conflict, by being elsewhere when the hunters come. But these aren't animals, Laura said, her voice rising. These are sentient beings with ships and weapons. You can fight back. Skalamira appeared on one of the smaller screens calling in from her research station. Fighting is not in our nature. Communications specialist Kim. My species evolved from creatures that spent millions of years running from predators. Those instincts are written into our genetic code. When we see a predator, every cell in our body tells us to flee. The idea of turning and fighting is literally incomprehensible to us. Jake watched the screens as the Krell moved through a city, their weapons cutting down fleeing civilians. He saw a Veltari mother trying to shield her children, saw the moment when the Krell warriors noticed them. He looked away before the end. But the image was burned into his mind. Claire had moved to another console, pulling up tactical information. Commander, look at this. The Krell aren't just raiding. They've established a base on the southern continent. They're bringing in supplies, setting up infrastructure. This isn't a hunting party. This is an invasion. Henry joined her, his eyes scanning the data. If they're establishing a permanent presence, they'll use Velter Prime as a staging ground for more attacks. Every council world in this sector will be at risk. Jake turned back to Ambassador Velcrin. Let us help. Let humanity respond to this threat. The chamber fell silent. Every council member turned to look at the humans, and Jake could see the fear in their eyes. But now he understood it wasn't just fear of the Krell. It was fear of what the humans might become if they were unleashed. You want us to authorize military action? Velcrin asked slowly. You want permission to hunt the hunters? I want permission to save lives, Jake replied. The Krell are killing your people right now. Every minute we debate is another minute they have to continue the slaughter. A debate erupted among the council members. Some argued that allowing humans to engage in combat would be too dangerous, that it would set a precedent they couldn't control. Others pointed out that the Krell had killed more civilians in the past hour than had died in the entire Dismayer Council territory in the previous decade. The argument went in circles, fear battling with desperation. Finally, Scholar Myra spoke up. I have studied the humans extensively. I believe they are capable of controlled violence, something we have never encountered in a sentient species. They have spent their entire history learning to balance their predatory instincts with their social nature. If any species can face the Krell without becoming like them, it would be humans. Velcrin looked at Jake for a long moment. If we authorize this and you fail, the Council will not send reinforcements. We cannot. Our people would refuse orders to engage in combat. You would be alone. We understand, Jake said. And if you succeed through excessive violence, if you become a threat to council members, we will have no choice but to expel your species and bar you from council space. We understand that too. Another vote was conducted faster this time. The results showed 8 green lights and 4 red. It was enough. You have authorization, Velcrin said quietly. Save our people, Commander Morrison. Show us that predators can be more than monsters. Jake immediately activated his communication link to Earth. The response came from Admiral Lisa Hayes, a veteran officer whose steady voice had guided humanity through first contact and every challenge since. Earth Command reads you, Commander. What's the situation? Jake explained quickly, laying out the Krell attack and the Council's authorization. When he finished, there was a long pause. You understand what you're asking for, Admiral Hayes finally said. If you engage the Krell, there's no going back. You'll be committing humanity to a role as the galaxy's enforcers. Are you prepared for that responsibility? Jake looked at the screens showing Velter Prime burning. He thought about the Veltari mother and her children, about the thousands already dead and the thousands more who would die if no one acted. He thought about what it meant to be human, to have the capability for violence, but also the choice of when and how to use it.
Admiral,
We're prepared. Then you have Earth's authorization. To support vessels are already en route to your position. The Valiant and the Pioneer will arrive in 18 hours. Until then, begin your preparations. And Commander, bring our people home. As the communication ended, Jake turned to his crew. Claire was already pulling up star charts and plotting courses. Henry was accessing every piece of data the Council had on Krell biology and tactics. Laura was composing messages to the other human vessels. Coordinating their approach, they moved with purpose now, with focus. Something had shifted in the room, a change so subtle that the Council members didn't notice at first. The humans stood a little straighter, their movements became more precise, their speech more clipped and efficient. They were preparing for something the galaxy hadn't seen in thousands of years. Scholar Mira watched them from her screen, her recording equipment capturing every moment. She made another note in her research log. The humans have received permission to hunt. I am observing a transformation in their behavior. It is as if they have been given permission to be themselves. The Valiant arrived first, cutting through the darkness of space like a blade. It was a military vessel, built for speed and combat. With weapon systems that made the Council observers nervous just looking at them, Captain Greg Foster commanded the ship. A career officer who had served in 3 different conflict zones on Earth before humanity reached the stars. His crew numbered 50, all trained for combat operations. The Pioneer followed 6 hours later, a research vessel that had been retrofitted with medical facilities and rescue equipment. Dr. Amy Russell led a team of scientists and medical personnel who had volunteered for the mission. She was a behavioral psychologist who specialized in stress response and decision-making under pressure. When she heard about the Krell attack, she had immediately requested assignment to the response. Team Jake gathered the senior officers in the briefing room aboard the Horizon's Edge. The 3 ship commanders sat around a table with their key personnel, while Scholar Mira and 2 other Council observers watched from a separate screen. The Council had insisted on documenting everything, wanting to understand how humans approached warfare. Our objective is simple, Jake began. Bringing up a holographic display of Velter Prime, the Krell have established a base here in the southern continent. They're using it to launch raids across the planet. We need to destroy that base and drive them off the world. Greg leaned forward, studying the display. What do we know about their defenses? Claire activated a series of images pulled from Council surveillance. The base is heavily fortified. They have energy shields, automated defense turrets, and at least 3 capital ships in orbit. The Council estimates between 500 and 1,000 Krell warriors on the ground. We're outnumbered and outgunned, Henry added. But the Krell have never faced organized resistance before. They're used to prey species that run. They won't expect us to attack. Dr. Russell spoke up from her position near the back of the room. I've been reviewing the psychological profiles of predator species. The Krell operate on instinct and hierarchy. They respect strength and dominance. If we can demonstrate superiority in combat, they may withdraw rather than face certain defeat. So we hit them hard and fast, Greg said. Make them understand they're dealing with another apex predator. Jake nodded. But we're not just fighting for territory or dominance. We're fighting to save lives. The Krell have taken prisoners, using them as bait to lure in rescue attempts. We need to get those people out. Laura had been monitoring communications from the surface. The surviving Veltari are holed up in the capital city. The Krell are slowly surrounding them, cutting off escape routes. We have maybe 48 hours before they're completely trapped. The planning session lasted 6 hours. The humans examined every angle, every possible scenario. They studied the terrain, the weather patterns, the Krell's movement schedules. They planned primary approaches and backup plans for the backup plans. It was methodical, detailed work that required patience and precision. Scholar Mira watched the entire process with growing fascination. She had expected the humans to be aggressive and impulsive, to charge into battle with emotions running high. Instead, They were calm and analytical. They talked about violence the way her people talked about crop rotation, as a necessary task to be completed efficiently. But she also noticed something else. The humans were changing. It was subtle at first, small shifts in body language and speech patterns. They moved with more purpose, wasted fewer words. When they looked at the images of Krell warriors, their pupils dilated, slightly in ancient response to the presence of a threat. They were still the same people, but something deep inside them was waking up. During a break in the planning, Dr. Russell pulled Scala Myra aside for a private conversation. The two scientists had developed a rapport during the weeks since humanity joined the Council, sharing data about their respective species. "You're wondering about the changes you're seeing," Dr. Russell said. It wasn't a question. Scholar Mira's ears twitched, a sign of acknowledgement in her species. "Your people are different now. More focused, almost like a different subspecies." "We're the same people," Dr. Russell explained. "But humans have what we call a threat response system. When we perceive danger, our bodies and minds shift into a different mode. Heart rate increases, senses sharpen, decision-making becomes more reactive. In ancient times, this helped our ancestors survive encounters with predators. But you are the predators," Scholar Mira pointed out. "For both," Dr. Russell said. "That's what makes humans unique. We evolved as prey animals that became predators. We remember what it's like to be hunted, and that empathy guides our actions. But we also know how to hunt, and that knowledge makes us effective. And when this is over, will they return to how they were before?" Dr. Russell considered the question. Yes and no. They'll relax, become less focused on the threat. But they'll also remember. They'll know what they're capable of. That knowledge changes a person. The conversation was interrupted by an alert from the bridge. The Krell had launched another raid, this time hitting a refugee convoy trying to evacuate civilians from a coastal city. The attack was brutal and efficient, leaving no survivors. The humans watching the footage fell silent, their faces hardening. Jake made the decision to advance their timeline. They would move in 12 hours instead of 24. Every minute they waited was another chance for the Krell to kill more innocents. The crews began their final preparations. Weapons were checked and rechecked. Medical supplies were rescue equipment was loaded onto shuttles. The humans moved through their tasks with practiced efficiency. Each person knowing their role and executing it flawlessly. Greg Foster stood on the bridge of the Valiant, watching his crew work. He had led soldiers in combat before, had given orders that sent people into danger. But this felt different. This wasn't about defending territory or political objectives. This was about stopping monsters from killing innocent people. It felt personal in a way that military operations rarely did. Claire ran simulations on the horizon's edge, testing different approach vectors and attack patterns. She found herself thinking like the prey, anticipating where the Krell would expect threats to come from, then planning to come from somewhere else. It was a strange mental exercise, putting herself in the mind of the hunted. While planning to be the hunter, Henry reviewed the biological data on the Krell one more time. Their exoskeletons were tough, but not impenetrable. Their sensory organs were concentrated in their head regions, making those high-priority targets. They required a specific atmospheric mixture, which meant their base would have environmental controls that could be disrupted. Every weakness was noted, every vulnerability cataloged. Laura maintained contact with the Veltari survivors on the surface. She spoke with a teacher named Narin who was sheltering 30 children in a basement, with a doctor who was treating wounded in a makeshift hospital, with an elderly male who refused to evacuate because he wanted to document what was happening. Their voices, frightened but determined, reminded Laura why this mission mattered. As the final hour approached, Jake called his crew together. They gathered in the main hangar bay, 63 humans preparing to face an enemy that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries. He looked at their faces and saw the same expression on each one. They were afraid, but they were also ready. "We're about to do something no other species in the Council has done in recorded history," Jake said. "We're going to attack the Krell directly. We're going to hunt the hunters. Some of you might not come back from this. I want you to understand that before we go. No one spoke. No one looked away. But I also want you to understand why we're doing this. Those people down there, the Veltari, they can't fight. Their entire evolution has taught them to run, to hide, to survive by avoiding conflict. We evolved differently. We can fight. And because we can, we have a responsibility to fight for those who can't. He paused, gathering his thoughts. When we're done here, the galaxy is going to see us differently. They're going to know what we're capable of. That's a burden we'll carry. But it's a burden I'm willing to accept if it means saving lives. Are you with me? The response was immediate and unanimous. 63 voices answering as one. Yes, sir. Scholar Mira watched from her observation screen, her recording equipment capturing every moment. She made a final note before the humans departed. I am witnessing the moment when humanity's hunter mode fully awakens. They are not doing this from hatred or territorial instinct. They are doing this from choice, from a conscious decision to use violence in service of protection. It is the most terrifying and most beautiful thing I have ever seen. The attack began at dawn on Velter Prime, when the planet's sun was just beginning to light the eastern sky. The Krell were creatures of habit, their raids following predictable patterns based on light cycles and temperature. The humans had studied these patterns and chosen their moment carefully. The Valiant dropped out of orbit first, its engines burning bright against the purple sky. The Krell's automated defenses activated immediately, energy weapons tracking the descending ship. But Greg Foster was ready for them. The Valiant twisted and dove, its pilot threading through the weapons fire with precision that came from years of training. Return fire lanced out from the ship's cannons, targeting the defense towers with surgical accuracy. On the ground, Krell warriors poured out of their base, responding to the threat as their instincts demanded. They were hunters, and hunters didn't flee from challenges. They moved in organized groups, their chitinous armor gleaming in the growing light. Their weapons designed to terrorize prey species, armed with lethal energy. They expected their attacker to break off to retreat in the face of superior numbers. That's what prey species did. That's what every council race had done for thousands of years. The Valiant didn't retreat. It dove lower, its weapons blazing, tearing into the Krell formations with focused fury. Explosions blossomed across the base perimeter. And for the first time in their collective memory, the Krell warriors felt something they had never experienced before. Uncertainty. While the Valiant held the Krell's attention, the Horizon's Edge and the Pioneer approached from the opposite direction. Flying low over the terrain to avoid detection, Jake commanded the operation from the bridge, watching multiple displays that showed the battlefield from every angle. Insertion team, prepare for deployment, he ordered. His voice was calm, steady. Despite the adrenaline coursing through his system, Claire sat at the navigation console, her fingers dancing across the controls. She had mapped every approach route, every possible evacuation path. Now she guided the ship through the narrow canyons that led to the Krell base's rear entrance. A service tunnel that the aliens had left lightly defended. The insertion team consisted of 20 humans, led by Lieutenant Kyle Murphy from the Valiant. They wore armor designed for hostile environments, carried weapons that could penetrate Krell exoskeletons, and moved with the practiced coordination of people who had trained together for months. Their mission was simple, but dangerous. Breach the base, locate the prisoners, and get them out. The shuttles landed in a clearing 2 kilometers from the base. The team moved out immediately, crossing the distance at a steady jog that would have exhausted most species but was natural for humans. They were persistence hunters, evolved to run prey into the ground over long distances. 2 kilometers was nothing. Henry Walsh led a separate technical team toward the base's power generation facility. If they could disrupt the Krell's energy grid, it would disable the shields and defense systems, making the base vulnerable. His team moved like shadows, using the terrain and the chaos of the main battle to mask their approach. The Krell had noticed the Valiant's attack pattern and adapted their response. More warriors emerged from the base, forming defensive lines and setting up heavy weapons. They were learning, adjusting their tactics. Greg Foster recognized the change and adapted as well, ordering his ship to pull back slightly, drawing the Krell forces forward, away from the base. It was a dance, brutal and precise. The humans leading, the Krell following, both sides testing and probing for weaknesses. But there was a crucial difference. The Krell were fighting to defend territory. The humans were fighting to save lives. Kyle, Rufe's insertion team, reached the service tunnel and found it guarded by 6 Krell warriors. The aliens noticed the humans immediately, their compound eyes tracking the approaching figures. For a moment, both sides simply stared at each other, predator facing predator. Then the battle began. The humans moved with coordinated precision, their weapons firing in calculated bursts. They didn't charge forward blindly. They used cover, suppressing fire, flanking maneuvers. Tactics developed over thousands of years of human warfare, refined in war. The observation station hung in the darkness of space like a silver flower, its petals made of metal and glass, stretching out toward the distant stars. Inside the main chamber, 12 different species gathered around a circular table that glowed with soft blue light. Each representative sat in a chair designed for their unique body shape. Some had 4 legs, others had 6. Some had fur, others had scales that shimmered under the artificial lights. Commander Jake Morrison stood at the entrance, his hands clasped, behind his back in a military stance that felt both natural and foreign in this place. He wore the dark blue uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps, a simple design without unnecessary decoration. Beside him, Navigator Claire Bennett adjusted the datapad in her hands for the 3rd time in as many minutes. She was nervous, though she tried not to show it. "They're ready for us," said Henry Walsh, the science officer. He was a tall man with graying hair and kind eyes that had seen more alien biology in the past 6 months than most humans would see in a lifetime. Remember, speak slowly, the translation. Devices work well, but rapid speech confuses them. Laura Kim, the communications specialist, nodded. She had spent weeks studying the Council's protocols, learning which gestures meant respect and which might accidentally cause offense. On her homeworld of Earth, a smile meant friendliness. Here, showing teeth could be interpreted as a threat display. She kept her lips pressed together as they walked into the chamber. The council members turned to watch the humans enter. Ambassador Velkrin rose from his seat, his massive frame towering over the table. He belonged to the Zintari species, herbivores, from a world of endless plains. His people had evolved to spot danger from great distances, and his large eyes could see in spectrums humans couldn't even imagine. When he spoke, his voice came through the translation device as a deep, melodious sound. "Humans of Earth, you stand before the Galactic Council to present your case for membership. We have reviewed your application and studied your species for many cycles. You are unusual." Jake stepped forward, keeping his movements smooth and unthreatening. "We are honored by your consideration, Ambassador. Humanity seeks only to learn from the great civilizations, represented here, and to contribute what we can to the peace and prosperity of the galaxy." A creature that looked like a cross between a rabbit and a deer leaned forward. This was Scholar Mira of the Quillen, a species known throughout the galaxy for their academic pursuits. Her voice came through the translator as high and quick, like wind chimes in a breeze. "Shh. Your species confuses us, Commander Morrison. Your eyes face forward, like a hunter. Your teeth are designed to tear as well as grind, yet you speak of peace and cooperation. You form bonds with other species, even those you once hunted for food on your world. How do we reconcile these contradictions?" Claire stepped forward, her nervousness forgotten as she entered the familiar territory of explanation. On Earth, many species evolved different survival strategies. Some ran, some hid, some climbed. Humans learned to do all of these things, but we also learned to work together. We discovered that cooperation made us stronger than competition. "A pretty philosophy," said another council member, a being covered in soft feathers that changed color as it spoke. "But philosophy is easy in times of peace. What happens when resources become scarce? When territory is contested? Do humans not revert to their hunting nature?" Henry spoke up, his scientist mind engaging with the question. "We do have conflicts, yes. But over our history, we've developed systems to resolve them without violence. laws, courts, democratic processes. We're not perfect, but we're trying to be better than our instincts. The council members exchanged glances. Their large eyes, positioned on the sides of their heads to watch for predators, gave them an almost alien quality that reminded the humans just how far from home they really were. After a long moment, Ambassador Velkrin raised one of his three-fingered hands. The council will vote on your provisional membership. You will have access to our trade networks and knowledge databases. However, you must prove yourselves capable of resolving conflicts peacefully.
Ow.
One violation, and your membership will be revoked. Do you accept these terms? Jake didn't hesitate. We accept, Ambassador. Thank you for this opportunity. The vote was conducted in silence, each council member pressing a panel in front of them. Lights flickered across the table's surface, tallying the results. When it finished, 10 of the 12 lights glowed green. Only 2 showed red. It is decided, Velkrin announced. Welcome to the Galactic Council, humans of Earth. The ceremony that followed was brief. The humans were given data chips containing volumes of information about council protocols, trade regulations, cultural guidelines for interaction with member species. They were assigned quarters on the station and informed that a formal celebration would be held in 3 days as they walked back to their ship. The horizon's edge, Laura finally allowed herself to smile. We did it. We're actually part of the galactic community. Part of it? Yes, Jake said, his expression thoughtful. But I noticed something during the vote. Did you see which 2 voted against us? Henry had noticed. The Kelvari and the Thune. Both species from worlds that had significant predator populations before they achieved space travel. They remember what it was like to be hunted. They're afraid of us, Claire said quietly. They look at us and see something that reminds them of their nightmares. Jake stopped walking and turned to face his crew. Then we prove them wrong. We show them that humans can be trusted, that we're not the monsters they fear. This is bigger than just us. This is about every human who will come after us. Every child who will grow up knowing that humanity has a place among the stars. They continued to their ship, unaware that in the outer regions of the galaxy, something was stirring. The Krell, a species the Council had encountered only in terror and tragedy, were moving again. Their ships, dark and angular, slipped through the void like sharks through deep water. They had been quiet for many years, long enough for the Council to hope they had moved on to other hunting grounds. But the Krell never truly left. They were patient, calculating. They waited and watched, learning the patterns of the prey species that thought themselves safe behind walls and treaties. And now, they were ready to hunt again. On the observation station, Scholar Myra sat in her quarters, reviewing the recordings of the human delegation. She played back the moment when Commander Morrison had entered the chamber, studying the way he moved. There was something in his gait, a fluidity that spoke of confidence and capability. His crew moved with similar grace, their heads turning, in small, precise movements, to track everything around them. She made a note in her research log, a single sentence that would later prove prophetic. Humans walk like sleeping predators, graceful and unaware of their own potential for violence. I wonder what it would take to wake them up, the answer to. That question would come sooner than anyone expected, and it would change the galaxy forever. The emergency alert came 3 weeks after humanity's acceptance into the Council. Jake was in his quarters aboard the Horizon's Edge, reviewing trade agreements with a merchant collective from the Indari sector, when every screen in the room turned red. Laura's voice came through the communication system, tight with stress. Commander, you need to get to the bridge right now. Something's happened on Velter Prime. Jake ran through the corridors of the station, his crew falling in behind him as they converged on the observation deck. When he arrived, the main display showed a scene of devastation that made his stomach turn. Velter Prime, a beautiful world of golden fields and crystal rivers, burned. Smoke rose from dozens of impact sites, obscuring the view of cities that had stood for thousands of years. Ambassador Velkrin stood at the center of the room, his large body trembling. Around him, other council members huddled in small groups, their voices rising in a cacophony of fear and confusion. Jake had never heard prey animals in panic before, but he recognized the sound instinctively. It was the sound of creatures who knew they were being hunted. "What happened?" Jake asked, approaching the ambassador. Velkrin turned to him, and Jake saw something in those large eyes that he hadn't seen before. Terror, raw and primal. The Krell. They came without warning, without demands. They simply began killing. Thousands are dead already. Thousands more are trapped in the cities. On the display, footage from the surface showed the attackers. The Krell were insectoid, their bodies covered in black chitinous armor that reflected no light. They moved on 6 legs with a speed that seemed impossible for creatures of their size. Their weapons tore through buildings like paper, and they showed no interest in surrender or negotiation. They were killing for the sake of killing. Claire moved to a console and began pulling up data. Her fingers flew across the controls, accessing council databases and military records. "Commander, the Krell have hit Velter Prime 17 times in the past hour. At different locations, different targets. This isn't a raid for resources. They're hunting." Henry stood beside her, his scientist's mind processing the information even as his human heart reacted to the carnage. "The Council must have defense forces. Where are they?" A small furry creature that reminded Jake of an otter spoke up. It perfected through countless conflicts. The Krell responded with their own tactics, trying to overwhelm the humans through superior strength and numbers. But the humans were ready for this. They had studied Krell combat footage, understood their patterns. When the aliens charged, the humans fell back to prepared positions. When the Krell tried to flank, they found the paths already covered. 3 Krell fell in the first minute. The remaining 3 tried to retreat, to call for reinforcements. They didn't make it. The humans pushed forward, securing the tunnel entrance and moving deeper into the base. Henry's team reached the power facility and found it was more heavily guarded than expected. 8 Krell warriors patrolled the perimeter, their weapons ready. Henry made a quick decision. They couldn't fight that many and win. But they didn't need to fight. He pulled out a small device that Dr. Russell had prepared. A combination of human technology and adapted council science. It was designed to emit a frequency that interfered with Krell neural patterns, causing disorientation and confusion. It wouldn't work for long, maybe 30 seconds. But 30 seconds was enough. Henry activated the device and tossed it toward the guards. The Krell immediately began stumbling, their movements uncoordinated. Henry's team rushed forward, bypassing the confused warriors and reaching the power facility's control room. They had exactly 12 minutes before the Krell's backup systems kicked in and restored the shields inside the base. Kyle's team found the prisoners. They were being held in a large chamber near the center of the complex, guarded by more Krell warriors than the humans had ammunition to handle. Kyle reported the situation to Jake, his voice tight with frustration. "We found them, but we're looking at least 20 guards. We can't fight through that many and protect the prisoners at the same time." Jake processed the information quickly. They needed a distraction, something to pull the guards away. He looked at the tactical display and made a decision that would haunt him later. "Greg, I need you to hit the base's main barracks. Make it loud." Greg understood immediately. "That will draw warriors from across the base, including the ones guarding the prisoners, I know. It will also put my ship and crew in the direct line of fire." "I know," Jake repeated. "I wouldn't ask if there was another way." There was a pause. Then Greg's voice came back, firm and certain. "We're on it. Give us 2 minutes." Valiant's attack on the barracks was devastating. Every weapon the ship had fired at maximum power into a concentrated area. The explosions could be seen from orbit, a massive fireball that rose into the sky. Krell warriors rushed toward the attack, abandoning their posts throughout the base to respond to the threat, including the guards. Watching the prisoners, Kyle's team moved in the moment the guards left, breaking through the chamber doors and finding 200 Veltari huddled together in fear. They were injured, traumatized, but alive. The humans immediately began organizing them for evacuation, speaking in calm voices. Providing water and basic medical care, Laura coordinated the extraction, her voice guiding the shuttle pilots to the base's rear exit where Kyle's team was leading the prisoners out. The Veltari moved slowly, unused to the chaos of combat, but they moved. The human soldiers formed a protective perimeter, their weapons ready for any Krell that might return. Henry's team finished setting their charges on the power facility and retreated. When the charges detonated, the entire base went dark. Shields flickered and died. Defense systems shut down. The Krell's technological advantage disappeared in an instant. Greg used that moment to press the attack. The Valiant's weapons tearing into the no-vulnerable base structures. The Krell forces began to fall back, their defensive lines collapsing under the coordinated assault. But the victory came with a price. A Krell weapon found its mark, striking the Valiant's port engine. The ship shuddered, alarms blaring across the bridge. Greg fought to maintain control as his crew worked frantically to contain the damage. "We're losing altitude," the pilot reported. "We need to pull back." "Not yet," Greg said through gritted teeth. "The prisoners aren't clear." Jake watched from the horizon's edge as the Valiant struggled to stay airborne. He wanted to order Greg to retreat to save his ship and crew. But if the Valiant left now, the Krell would turn their attention to the fleeing prisoners. The shuttle carrying the Veltari was slow, vulnerable. It needed more time. 30 seconds, Laura reported. "The shuttle is almost to the safe zone." It was the longest 30 seconds of Jake's life. The Valiant took hit after hit, its armor ablating under the Krell weapons fire. Sections of the ship vented atmosphere into the thin air. But Greg held position, his weapons still firing. Still drawing the Krell's attention? "Shuttle is clear," Laura finally announced. "Get out of there," Jake ordered. Greg didn't need to be told twice. The damaged ship climbed into the sky, its engines straining. More Krell fire followed it, but the ship was already out of effective range. They had made it. The Pioneer moved in to collect the shuttle and its precious cargo. While the horizon's edge provided cover, the three human ships began their withdrawal, pulling back from the planet as the Krell base burned behind them. The Krell didn't pursue. They had learned something today, a lesson that would spread throughout their species. Humans were not prey. Humans were fellow predators, and more than that, humans were predators, who hunted with purpose and coordination that the Krell couldn't match. The medical bay of the Pioneer was filled with activity as Dr. Russell and her team worked to treat the rescued Veltari. Most of the injuries were minor, the result of poor conditions during captivity rather than active abuse. The Krell had kept the prisoners alive as bait, not caring whether they were comfortable or healthy in the process. Jake walked through the bay, stopping at each bed to speak with the survivors. They looked at him with large, frightened eyes, and he realized they were as afraid of him as they had been of the Krell. He was a predator species after all, and their instincts couldn't distinguish between a predator who hunted them and a predator who saved them. A young Veltari female, barely more than a child, reached out and touched his hand. She said something in her own language, too quick for the translator to catch. An older Veltari nearby provided translation. She says, "Thank you." She says, "You are a good hunter." Jake didn't know how to respond to that. He simply nodded and moved on, feeling the weight of what they had done settling onto his shoulders. The three human ships limped back to the council station, the Valiant trailing smoke but still functional. Captain Greg Foster had managed to get his crew home, though the ship would need extensive repairs. 3 crew members had been injured during the fighting, but none had died. It was better than Jake had dared to hope. The council was waiting when they arrived. Every member species had representatives present, and the observation chamber was filled to capacity. Scholar Myra was there too, her recording equipment capturing everything as the human commanders entered. Ambassador Velkrin stood at the center of the room. His large body seemed smaller somehow, diminished by what he had witnessed. When he spoke, his voice carried across the chamber through the translation systems. "The Council has observed your actions on Velter Prime. We have seen the recordings, reviewed the data, heard testimony from the survivors. There is much we must discuss." Jake stood with his crew and the other human commanders, waiting for judgment. They had succeeded in their mission, saved over 200 lives and destroyed a Krell base. but they had also demonstrated a capacity for violence that terrified the council races. Many on this council believe you should be expelled, Velcrin continued. They say that having two predator species in the galaxy is too dangerous. That your actions prove humans are no better than the Krell. They point to the destruction you caused, the efficiency with which you killed, and they see a threat to galactic peace. Jake felt his crew tense beside him. They had known this might happen, but knowing didn't make it easier. However, Velcrin said, and something in his tone made Jake look up. Scholar Mira has presented evidence that changes this perspective. Scholar, if you would explain. Mira stepped forward, her small frame seeming fragile among the larger council members, but her voice was clear and confident. I have studied human behavior extensively during this crisis. I watched them prepare for combat, engage the enemy, and return with prisoners. What I observed challenges everything we thought we knew about predator species. She activated a display showing footage from the battle. The humans could have simply destroyed the Krell base from orbit. It would have been safer, more efficient. But they chose a ground assault because prisoners were present. They risked their lives to save people who were not their own species. More footage appeared, showing Kyle's team organizing the Veltari evacuation. During the rescue, the humans provided medical care, water, and emotional support to the prisoners. They spoke calmly, moved carefully to avoid frightening them. This is not predator behavior. This is something else entirely. A final image showed Greg Foster keeping the Valiant in position while taking fire, refusing to retreat until the prisoners were safe. Captain Foster's ship was severely damaged because he chose to protect the fleeing shuttle rather than ensure his own survival. This is sacrifice. This is heroism. These are not concepts we associate with apex predators. The chamber fell silent as the council members processed this information. Finally, a representative from the Thune species spoke up. They had been one of the two who voted against humanity's membership initially. What you describe sounds noble, Scholar Myra, but how can we trust that humans will always choose this path? What happens when their interests conflict with ours? What happens when they decide we are prey? Dr. Russell stepped forward, asking permission to speak. Velcrin granted it with a gesture. I understand your fear, Dr. Russell said. Your species evolved to run from predators. That instinct is millions of years old, and it has kept you alive. But humans evolved differently. We were both prey and predator, both hunted and hunter. We learned that cooperation was more effective than competition, that protecting the group made everyone stronger. She paused, choosing her words carefully. Yes, humans are capable of great violence. What you saw in Velter Prime is just a fraction of what we could do if we chose to. But the key word is chose. We choose when and how to use violence. We choose to protect rather than dominate. That choice is what defines us. What stops you from making a different choice tomorrow? The Thune representative pressed. The same thing that has stopped us from destroying ourselves for the past 1,000 years, Jake said. Our values, our laws. Our commitment to being better than our worst instincts. We're not perfect. We've made terrible mistakes in our history, but we've learned from them, and we keep trying to do better. The debate continued for hours. Council members raised concerns, asked questions, demanded assurances. The humans answered each query honestly, acknowledging their capacity for violence while explaining the cultural and moral frameworks that guided their actions. Finally, Ambassador Velcrin called for a vote. The question before the council is this: should humanity retain its membership with full rights and responsibilities? The vote took longer than before. Each council member took time to consider, to weigh their fear against the evidence they had seen. When the results appeared, Jake held his breath. 11 green lights. 1 red, the motion passes, Velcrin announced. Humanity will retain its membership in the Galactic Council. Furthermore, we propose the creation of a new role, one specifically suited to human capabilities. We name you the Council's guardian force, responsible for responding to threats that other species cannot or will not engage. Jake exchanged glances with his crew. This was more than they had hoped for, but it also came with significant responsibility. We accept, he said carefully. But we want to be clear about our limitations. We're not an army. We have 3 ships and fewer than 200 personnel. We can respond to crises, but we can't police the entire galaxy. We understand, Velkrin said. Earth will be asked to provide additional resources, and the Council will support the development of a proper Guardian Corps. But for now, you have proven that cooperation between predator and prey species is possible. That alone is worth celebrating.
Ow!
The formal ceremony ended, but Scholar Myra requested a private meeting with Jake and Dr. Russell. They met in a small observation room overlooking the station's main hangar. I wanted to thank you, Myra said. You've given me data that will revolutionize our understanding of predator species psychology. But more than that, you've given the Council something we've never had before. Hope. Hope. Jake asked. For 10,000 years, the Council has survived by avoiding conflict. We built our civilization on the principle that violence solves nothing. But we've also lived in constant fear of species like the Krell, knowing that one day they might destroy everything we've built. You've shown us that there's another option, that someone can stand between the hunters and the hunted.
Act!
Dr. Russell smiled. We're not heroes, Scholar. We're just people doing what needs to be done. Perhaps, Mira replied. But sometimes that's exactly what heroes are. Days later, Jake stood on the bridge of the Horizon's Edge as it prepared to depart the Council station. The ship had been resupplied and repaired, ready for whatever came next. His crew had changed during the mission, become harder and more focused. They had learned what they were capable of, and that knowledge would stay with them forever. Laura approached him with a datapad. The final casualty reports from Velter Prime. The Krell killed over 3,000 civilians before we stopped them. The Council estimates we saved at least 10,000 more by destroying their base. Jake took the pad, reading through the numbers. 3,000 dead. It was a staggering loss, but it could have been so much worse. He thought about the Veltari child, who had called him a good hunter, and he wondered if she understood the cost of what they had done. Commander Claire said from the navigation station, "We're receiving a transmission from Earth. Admiral Hayes wants to speak with you." Jake activated the communication link. Admiral Hayes appeared on the screen, her expression serious but not unkind. "Commander Morrison, I've reviewed your mission reports and the Council's decision. Well done. You've secured humanity's place in the galactic community and established a new role for our species. That's no small achievement. Thank you, Admiral. What are our orders? For now, maintain your position with the Council and continue building relationships with member species. We're establishing the Guardian Corps as a permanent organization. With volunteers from Earth's military and civilian sectors, you'll be training the first recruits within 6 months." Jake nodded, processing the information. And the Krell. Will they retaliate? Intelligence suggests they've withdrawn from Council space entirely. Apparently, losing a base to what they considered a prey species has severely damaged their reputation among their own kind. They're dealing with internal conflicts now, but we'll be ready if they return. The transmission ended, and Jake turned back to his crew. They were all present on the bridge, waiting for his orders. Henry at the science station, Claire at navigation, Laura at communications. They had been through hell together, and they had come out the other side changed, but intact. "Set course for the Indari sector," Jake ordered. "The Council has asked us to establish a Guardian outpost there. It's time to get to work." As the Horizon's Edge moved away from the station, Scholar Myra watched from her observation deck. She was completing her final report on human behavior, documenting the day the Galactic Council had observed humanity's hunter mode fully awaken. Her conclusion was simple but profound. Humans are predators, yes, but they are predators who have chosen to hunt the darkness rather than the light. They are predators who protect the prey. In doing so, they have given the galaxy something it has never had before: predators we can trust. The Council is safer today than it has been in millennia. Not because the threats have diminished, but because someone is finally willing to face them. The age of running from danger is over. The age of standing against it has begun. And humanity will stand at the front of that line, not because they must, but because they choose to. That choice makes all the difference. The report would be studied by scholars for generations, a turning point in galactic history. The day when two evolutionary paths, predator and prey, found a way to coexist and thrive together. The day when the hunters became the guardians, and the galaxy learned that predators could be more than monsters, they could be heroes.